Yeah.
I mean, I know legally, according to the Constitution, the state is obligated to meet those obligations. But let's say down the road, the governor and the legislature are decided to change it.
Yeah. Well, I actually think, believe it or not, that you can count the unions as a pretty objective source on this. We are the ones who actually created the funding requirement for the pension plan to begin with through bargaining back in 1981. Before that, the legislature put in money whenever they felt like it. So actually, we believe strongly in pension funding. We think it's a really good idea. And what I can tell you is this. There are two ways to measure how well funded a pension plan is. The most common one, because it's the easiest for all these national agencies to do, they compare the percentage of money, the amount of total liability of the fund in the future based upon all the anticipated years of service of everybody who's currently in the fund and how long they're going to live after they retire, etc. That's the total liability. And then they look at how much money is actually in the fund right now after they discount the total liability by present value through all kinds of fund math, and they give you a percentage. Okay? And they say if you're 80% funded, you're fully funded. Anywhere over 80, you're fully funded. Anywhere under 80, you're underfunded. And on that measure, we're not very well funded at all. Okay, depending on when you ask, we're around 50% funded. And under that measure, you would say, yikes, our pension fund is in trouble. But that is not a measure in any way of the likelihood of your getting the benefits. If you want to know what the likelihood of your getting the benefits is, this is what you got to look at. First of all, you got to look at, are you in a state where the full faith and credit of the state is pledged behind the benefits, or are you in a state where only the pension fund is pledged behind the benefits, right? Who made the promise? The state of Connecticut, in our case, or the fund? If you're in a state where only the fund is on the hook and the fund is underfunded, then you better work. If you're in a state where the whole state is on the hook, then obviously you worry a lot less. So that's one of the things you look at. Connecticut, the contract is with the state of Connecticut. It is the state of Connecticut that is responsible under the federal Constitution to make the payment. So absent the most amazing financial crisis, they are bound by federal law to make the payments. Second thing, if you want to be equally well reassured, when people actually figure out how to buy bonds, how much to pay for bonds, which is a realistic way of judging how safe something is, what they look at is the liability of the pension fund as compared to the earning powers or the income powers of the entity that's responsible. Again, if the entity that's responsible is only the fund itself, then that's very limited income power. The state of Connecticut's income powers as compared to other states is actually the highest. We're the wealthiest state in the country. So as far as the security of your payments as a beneficiary, it is Connecticut would come out safer than any other state in the country as compared to less safe. But so, that's, again, I cannot tell you that it is impossible that money will get lost. But by the way, one person asked me this question and said, well, I only want to do this if it's impossible, but I could lose my money. So then I said, well, where'd you got your ARP money? So I don't really know. Is it impossible that wherever you have your ARP money could go out of business? Should I introduce you to all the people who've lost so much money? And it's like, oh, no, it's not. So I think nothing's impossible, but the security of the pension fund is not something. I mean, it's an important issue in terms of for future employees. When you have underfunded pension funds, it's hard to get improvements in benefits. It's hard sometimes to negotiate raises. There's a lot of reasons why it's a bad thing to have underfunded pension funds, but risk that your beneficiaries are going to just not get their payments. For the state of Connecticut, I'll work. So I think you were next, and then there, and then there.
Could you just explain the concept of buying fast service? I'm not really sure what that means.
Sure. People who transfer over, we don't want them to just be treated as new employees. Right? We want them to have the opportunity transfer over to the hybrid or the SAG award. We want them to have some recognition that they're not new employees. What we wanted originally, as I said, was for people to be able to transfer over and get past service paid for at the costs that they would have had to pay for it as service employees. We didn't get that. So what you're doing when you buy past service is you're buying past service at what they call the full actuarial cost. If you've been here 20 years, an actuary tells you based on those charts how much they think 20 years of service costs. And you can buy up to 20 years of service depending on how much money you have and want to invest. You can't buy more than 20 years. You've been here 20 years, you can't buy 30 years of service. But you can buy anywhere from 0 to 20 completely at your discretion. There was a fight to make all those things correct, but those things are correct. You can buy anywhere from 0 to 20 And the full actual cost is what the actuary says it costs the fund to provide you the benefits when you retire. Okay? So in some ways, it's the same thing as if you retire from ARP and buy an annuity. The difference is that when you buy an annuity, you're buying it on the private market. They make investment assumptions that are designed to make sure that they make a lot of money. So if you took $300,000 in the private market and said, I'd like to buy a life annuity, how much is that going to provide me per month after I retire? And you got a figure, and then you compared it to, I take $300,000, it's 20 years of service at my final average earnings, how much would I get under CSRS? You'll find under CSRS it's way higher. And plus under CSRS you have a cost of living adjustment. That's because the state of Connecticut's not making any money on your, it's breaking even. You're getting all the benefit of the investment interest, in effect, of the state of Connecticut, as compared to you buy a life annuity from those few insurance companies who still sell them. And believe me, Travelers, you buy a life annuity from Travelers, it doesn't give you all the benefit of its earnings.
Is it to your advantage to buy as many years as possible, as allowed, as many years as allowed, fast service?
Well, let me sound like Mitt Romney on this one and hedge my bets completely and change my story 6 times. No. I do have to hedge my bets a little bit, though. I can't sound as bad as Mitt Romney on that, or that can't be as dishonest as Mitt anyway. The question of whether it's to your advantage involves two things. One is what do you get out of service, and I can tell you that. I mean, I can tell you how to figure it out, and you can go and do the math, and you can say this is how much I'm going to get per month. All I got to do is estimate what my final average earnings are going to be and how old I'm going to be when I retire. And I can give you a real certainty on that. But then you say to me, okay, it's going to cost me $250,000. Am I better off with the $250,000? I don't know. What are you going to do with the $250,000? If you knew that 32 Black was going to come up in Foxwoods, obviously you're way better off with the $250,000. Put it on 32 Black and you're done. If you go in and ask an investment analyst, they'll tell you what they think $250,000 is worth in terms of producing a lifetime income for you. And if you get a good one and an honest one, and they'll tell you. My personal view, what I would do, I tend to err on what's the purpose of this money. The purpose of this money is not to make you rich, right? The purpose of this money is to make sure you have a decent, comfortable retirement. The CSRS does that pretty well. It tends to do that pretty well for career employees. So, that's my bias. I tend to think you're probably better off buying past service than having $250,000. But that's it's an individual choice. Talk to an investment talk to somebody good. By the way, I do advise if you're going to talk to an investment analyst, talk to someone who knows they're not going to get your $250 if you say, because we've had that happen a lot. So make sure whoever you talk to knows they're not going to touch your $250 no matter what they say. Whether they say put it in CSRS or don't, put it in the hybrid or don't. If they understand that, you'll get an honest answer. Ask them how much it would cost to buy a life annuity with that $250,000, and then compare that to what you get under CSRS. I made up the $250, obviously, but you get the point. Did I say you were next?
Yes, I was wondering.
You're over there.
Talk a little bit about when we are vesting. And number one. Number two, if you could very briefly repeat the differences between the hybrid and the SAG.
Okay.
Very briefly.
Okay, I can only do it briefly because there's two differences. Okay, the hybrid costs you 3% more per year in terms of employee contributions. That's the downside of the hybrid. The hybrid gains you the ability when you leave to get your contributions back plus your employer's contributions back plus 4% interest. So that's the up and that's the down. That's it, really simple. Vesting, there are two ways to look at it if you talk about the hybrid as compared to the SAG. Okay, the hybrid has its defined contribution aspect and its defined benefit aspect. In the defined contribution aspect, there is no vesting requirement. Your money is yours always. The employer's money is yours always, and the 4% interest is yours always. So if you go into the hybrid and you decide to leave a week later, you get your money back plus your employer's contributions plus interest for a week, 4% interest for a week. Okay, so no vesting requirements. On the looked at as a defined benefit plan, it has the same vesting rules as CSRS. Like all the other benefits are the same. And that's essentially 5 years for current employees. New employees is 10, but it's essentially 5 years. I sit over there was next to me. I hate not knowing anybody's name, but what can I do?
Now, this is a question probably with a fairly obvious answer. If you go into the hybrid plan and stay for 10 years, and then decide to get all your money back. It's a one-shot 4% interest. It is no compounding there.
It is
So it's
compounding.
much less than 4%.
No, it is compounding. It is compounding.
Explain that. 4% a year for as long as you keep the money?
Yes. It's a compounded 4% interest. I'm not certain if it's quarterly. I think we do it quarterly, but it might even be monthly. I don't remember. But it's a compounded interest rate.
So if you stay for 10 years, then
The money you put in 10%, the money you put in 10 years ago has been compounded, I think it's quarterly, so it's theoretically been compounded at 1% each quarter for 10 years. That's the money you put in 10 years ago. 9 years ago, obviously, it's for 9 years. The money is not, you don't earn interest on the money until it's in there.
the impression was, and my initial impression was, you take that total amount of money and the state will just simply add 4% to it.
Oh, no, that's not correct. That is not correct.
Because that's not a good deal.
No, that would not be a good deal. No, it is compounded interest. I just can't remember if it's monthly or quarterly, but it is compounded. Yeah, you were next and then next year. Yes.
Okay. One of the big differences between the SAG award and the hybrid that I remember was that there were two different calculators for purchasing your service. Is that correct? They're significantly different amounts.
It is absolutely correct and completely wrong.
Okay.
Now I do sound like Robbie. Now I totally sound like Robbie. Jeez. Okay. What you said is absolutely correct. That the calculator that came out for the SAG award is very different than the calculator that came out for the hybrid award.
It's significantly higher.
But that's because when the calculator was done for the SAG award was based upon the pension plan that existed at the time that the SAG award came out. It was never readjusted to take into account any of the changes that took place in 2011. So if the new calculator for the SAG award, if the IRS ever rules in our favor, there'll be a new calculator which will be almost identical to the hybrid calculator. The hybrid calculator will be a tiny bit more expensive, believe it or not. And the reason it's a tiny bit more expensive is that one circumstances that I said, where if you die before you're retirement eligible, then you get all your money back under the hybrid, whereas your beneficiary gets all your money back under the hybrid, whereas under the SAG award you'd only get 5/15. So it makes it's mathematically almost unnoticeable. Like on the scale of you would have to pay 302 to get the hybrid, 302,000 to get the hybrid, and 300 to get the SAG. But essentially they're the same calculator.
Okay.
But the old calculator looks totally different. But just don't use it. That's the problem.
Right, and that was frightening. The amounts that were coming out of the first calculator were really frightening.
Yes. Well, I mean, look, it's frightening anyway. I mean, I don't want to kid anybody. Actually, the full actual cost is high. It all depends on what you compare it to. It's very high as compared to what you would have paid if you were in service all along. And that's, we didn't win that. It's very low as compared to what you would pay if you were to buy an annuity from the traveler. Very, very low. So it just depends on what you compare it to. You were next, and then there's back there.
I don't know if you talked about this, but I haven't heard anything about Tier 3, and I'm wondering for newer employees, if you're on Tier 3 plans, how this might change, like how the calculations are different.
The Tier 3 choice works the same way that all the other choices work. That is, if you're a new employee, you can join the hybrid, you can join SERS, or you can join ARP. Obviously, if you join ARP, you join ARP. If you join SERS, you're going to pay a contribution rate of 2%. And if you join the hybrid equivalent of SERS, you're going to pay a contribution rate of 5%. So your benefits are going to be identical, whether you choose the hybrid or the SERS. You're going to pay 3% more per year in order to be in the hybrid because you have the privilege of taking your money out with interest, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Tier 3 is slightly different than Tier 2A, or we would have called it Tier 3, right? The difference has to do with the final average earnings are calculated differently. Vesting is 10 years instead of 5 years. It's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. But either way, if you were hired after July 1 or July 1, 2011 or later, those are your three choices: the Tier 3 hybrid formula, Tier 3 formula, or the ARP. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Before I take your question, is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet that I missed? Okay, you go first then.
I just was whispering to my friend here.
Oh, that's cheating. No whispering.
I have a silly question. When I came here 3 centuries ago, I was told that I had to do
No
TARP,
feeling.
right? And I was also told that I didn't have to pay Social Security anymore. Now,